we're going to look at customer acquisition as well as customer retention. So let's take a look at that. I'm still working from the assumption that a lot of you are small business owners, but of course these principles apply to any business, from a literally one-person operation working on the kitchen table all the way through to these huge conglomerates with hundreds of thousands of employees. Now I'm going to switch off my video. It's just, I find it very distracting looking at myself, so I'm going to do that and we can get straight into it. So, delighting your customers, part 3, with a view towards looking at how this can directly affect your sales. And if we just take a look at a quick summary, we really have had 3 masterclasses of approximately 90 minutes each. The first one was about why we need to do this and what customers want, how it's become so important in today's world to take a look at creating those happy feelings. Once again, a new survey was published recently which showed that in South Africa, 63% of people are suffering from some form of anxiety and depression. And that means that, you know, it's absolutely awful, but it means that your business, you personally, can go out there and make a difference. The opportunity to delight customers and to put a smile on their faces has been, you know, greater than ever before. And what I would like to suggest with this one and with the next module that we looked at, which was last week, which was how to implement actions to delight customers and get them loyal by adding value. If you haven't seen those, if I may suggest that you go back to YouTube, load them in and take a look at some of the things, crammed with lots and lots of ideas. But today in week 3, really, we are looking at how you can use your reputation to build sales, especially online. We will finish off the topic of customer retention, but there's a bridge also towards the customer acquisition side. So you'll see that I'm going to make that link, and you will see that by delighting customers, in fact, your sales job is made much easier. In fact, I think it was one of the marketing gurus, a chap by the name of Philip Kotler, who said, if you've done your marketing job correctly, then the job of sales becomes superfluous. And another chap by the name of Todd Brown, who I will be sharing some quotes from him today, he reckons that the sales process is probably less than 25% of your total process. So the direct selling, 25% of your total process when you've done the other 75% correctly. So we're going to talk about how you can use all of the stuff from the last 2 weeks to make sure that the right stuff happens. If we ask this question again, why we are here, because there's, I think, nothing worse in business than a brilliant product that nobody knows about. It's awful when there's a really amazing product or service or even a venue that people have to sell, but nobody knows about it, okay? And it becomes a really big issue, obviously. So that's what it's really all about. And here's that Todd Brown quotation I promised you. He says, your business success is based on how well your marketing converts, period. If you have marketing which is bringing you new customers every day, life can be grand. If not, your business, your income, your livelihood is vulnerable and at the risk of evaporating. So the question is, what do we do? And I've got hundreds of suggestions, but we will distill the most important ones for today. So we spent a lot of time talking about customer loyalty, and we will get into the idea of selling your products, your services, your brands, but you might not necessarily need to do that direct sales, which is going to be the latter half of today's presentation. And I'll have a little model that will help you over there. Just to cover, for those who are watching this for the first time, a little bit of a reminder of what happened last time. Essentially, to create sustainable customer loyalty, I said that there were 5 things that you can do to create higher barriers to switching. And the first 2 are really about the foundation for everything. We've got to make sure that the fundamental things. So from that perspective, getting the fundamentals right, getting the basics right, stop doing those dumb things, is critically important. And I said a special case of this is reducing customer effort, making it easy and effortless, seamless to do business with you on a physical, conceptual, emotional, and time level. Those 2 form a very solid foundation for the rest. If we don't get these 2 right, everything else crumbles. And so we spoke about the importance of relationships and how we've got to give customers obvious clues and evidence that we truly care and not just give them platitudes. And of course, then most of last week was around finding constantly and continuously innovative, creative, different, unique ways to give them unbelievable personal and memorable experiences. And it might be just for a few seconds, but I briefly discussed the whole idea of the peak end rule, that when customers look back to that chain of events that made them transact with you, they will remember two things. First of all, what happened right at the end, and then any peak experiences, any experiences that were very positive towards them. What I didn't mention last week, and I think it's implied, obviously, especially with the first two, is that there are also valleys. And if there are no peaks, but there's lots of valleys, then customers also don't enjoy that. And what do they remember? They remember the worst of those experiences. But if we get all of these things right, that then takes us through to the blue ocean, which is uncharted, expected territory. It's surprises, where we're creating a new market space where people suddenly say, wow, I didn't think that there was a company anywhere in the world that would respond to me like this. And there's that principle in marketing that says better to be first than to be better. And from that perspective, obviously, when you are the first, customers will always fondly remember that you were the first that took care of them in that particular way. And we looked at hundreds of examples over there. So when we take a look at why customers buy and what they actually buy, we can probably take a look at it in terms of a number of different levels. The obvious thing is that they're buying a product. Now, I'm going to confuse you now, because when I say product, I'm talking about the product, the service, the promise that we actually make over there. It could be that you run a fantastic restaurant in a beautiful location, all right? Then it's a combination of all those things. But what they actually pay for has got to work. That's where the basics become important. But then we need to look at the delivery system. And this is where a business such as Amazon, we always trot old Amazon out there. They have got a superb delivery system. And in fact, at one stage, they even took out a patent on, one-click buys. Okay, they said that nobody else in the world is allowed to use this technology. And for about 10 years, they had that uniqueness. But your delivery system, how you actually give the customers, could be the area where you do well. So if we take a look at, for example, beauty products, there are many, 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 many thousands of beauty products. Let me just get the laser pointer in there. There are literally thousands of products that you can sell, and probably not very different from each other, but the way they are delivered could be something that is completely different. And that obviously includes a lot of the service elements as well. So service is part of it. It's about the personal attention, the greeting, recognizing old customers, all of those basic things. But surrounding that then is what we have then called the experiences. And if you take a look at those first elements over there, it's really about how can we help our customers to avoid pain? How can we help them to find pleasure, however they define that? And we will take a look at a few examples again. And, what is the job to be done? What is it that they actually want to achieve by this? And sometimes the obvious is not what they want to achieve. So if we have a birthday party for my son, the restaurant is important. The quality of the food is important. The quality of the service is important. But more important than that, when I make my reservation, I want that experience to be a memorable experience for him. The job there is not so much good food, good service, everybody being served at the right time. It's really about, did we have a nice day? Did we have a celebratory occasion over there? That's the job that must be done. Many, many decades ago, one of the marketing gurus said, customers don't buy drills, they buy holes. Well, when you buy a drill, it's not because you want to collect drills. You want to obviously make a hole somewhere. And then we get to the point where we're saying, right, the total experience, which is really the emotional part. And I'm going to put a spanner in the works in a minute by talking about the emotions can also be intellectual things, but the emotional part of the experience surrounds everything. And that's what protects your product. So it might be that everything that you do and produce and supply is exactly the same. Your service is probably relatively easy to copy. If you take a look at the world of cosmetics, they're all sitting there at a department store with their counters, all with nice uniforms, beautiful young ladies teaching you about makeup and base and all the other things. But the total experience of the customer, when they start looking at you differently and remembering you, that is when it becomes easy to protect yourself. So the power of emotions becomes important. And I put up this slide. I said, how is it that we make ourselves indispensable? By giving them irresistible experiences. And in that process, we make our competitors irrelevant. So the idea of being unique and different and distinct and differentiated is important. It is of critical importance, and trying to differentiate as much as possible. It's not necessarily the product itself that is differentiated, as is an iPhone, but it could also be any one of those other areas. So to finish off the introduction and the recap, as Mark Zuckerberg, founder of Facebook, now called Meta, is concerned, nothing influences people more than a recommendation from a trusted friend. And this is where it makes sales a lot easier. And I'll talk about that in a minute. I'd like to take a quick detour over here to just talk about the price versus value. So what we have is what I've called here the marketing battleground. And essentially, on the left-hand scale, we look at the price you charge relative to your competitors. It could be that you are a low-cost producer, you are the cheapest, and you can get away with it because you're working off your kitchen table, all right? But it could also be that you offer a very high-level experience for a very high price, and everything in between. So typically, if we take a look at fast food market, you get McDonald's at the bottom end over here, and they're not pretentious. They're not saying you're going to have the best burger you've ever had, but you're going to get it with good value for money, and it's going to be clean and it's going to be fast. So they have a little formula called QSVC: quality, service, which usually means speed, okay, value, good value for money, and then convenience and cleanliness. So from that perspective, McDonald's is proud to be here. But then you have at the other extreme, if we look at takeaway food, then you have the Nando's of the world and the others, where they're charging a very high price. In fact, you might be able to even do it cheaper at your house. Everybody needs to make a decision where they want to be. Now, along the bottom scale, the horizontal scale, is the perception of quality of the total experience of the customer. And once again, they will either be really angry and disappointed because they are saying to themselves, that was awful, and I wish I didn't have to do this, okay? And typically, that happens when they are hostages, for example, as we are to the banks. But we also have those experiences where they say, wow, I never expected that. That was awesome. All right. Now, the safe zone in which to do business is this green zone. So McDonald's is here. They have no problem being the low-cost producer, but you've got to sell a lot more burgers than Steers sells, for example, in order to recoup that same money. And it's no problem being over here as long as you have those great efficiencies. But as you offer a better and better experience, so too you can charge higher prices. And then we get to the other extreme, which is really where we are completely differentiated. And so what happens is, from that perspective, it is so unique, so different, so special that customers don't care what price they pay. Now, the key word over here is perceptions. All right. So at one stage, there was an apocryphal story where they said that when you sell Rolls-Royce and Bentley and all those very expensive cars, where you're paying literally millions of rands, and Lamborghinis and Ferraris and all the rest of them, all right, they said, we don't go to car shows anymore, because when people go to car shows, they take a look at our prices and they say, oh, this is awful. This is incredibly expensive. I don't care what it is. But what they do is they go to airplane shows. And now when you take a look at, what it costs to buy a luxury car at an airplane show, well, this looks like a bargain. It looks like the change in the pocket. So perceptions play a very important role over here. But the differentiators are the ones that can get away with it. Certainly Nando's. I've spent far too much of my money at Nando's. We go there at least once a month, if not more, and we spend a lot of money, but it's worth it. We don't mind, because the experience and the taste of it and everything is so good at Nando's, and we pay much more for it. So that's the safe zone, and you need to make a decision in your business. Where are we going to lie? In fact, if you're very fortunate, you'll be able to have a range of products that you can sell to your customers all along here. So for example, in my little business, I have you know, you can buy a book for $10. Okay, you can buy a workshop if you don't attend the freebies run for organizations like Ort and others. You can buy a place onto a workshop for a couple of $100 for, you know, $50. Then you can get me into your business for a few thousand, and then you can go onto a mastermind, which is, you know, right up at the top over there, where it's completely customized, where you get one-on-one time, etc. Volkswagen have the same. They have from, you know, their cheap offer, or Toyota, their cheapest offer, but you can be a loyal customer for life by, you know, upgrading your vehicle until eventually you get a Toyota Prado, or you know, you get a VW that costs you the better part of R1.5 million when you take a look at the Touareg and so on. So we keep our customers loyal by giving them an offering that continues along that line, and most car companies obviously do that as well. So from that perspective, the two interesting zones are the ones which are not on that line, because we can learn lessons. If you take a look at this zone over here, this is where that word perception becomes so important. This is the rip-off zone. Essentially, this is the zone where we're saying that in the view of customers, they are paying too high a price for something which is actually of little or no value. Now, if I asked you for some examples of this, and if we had a bit more time, I would actually open this up to the floor, but you would typically say things like, for example, when there are few substitutes, monopolies and cartels, mobile phone industry, banks, etc. If there's proprietary technology, in other words, this is the only business that can supply this. When there's a high cost of switching, once again, banks can rely on that. When it's a grudge purchase, all right, when we simply have no choice, I have to borrow money to buy a house, okay, it's a grudge purchase. I have to use, buy a policy, an insurance policy every month. I don't want to, but, you know, if something goes wrong, I have to have that peace of mind. If somebody's desperate, if they are sitting with toothache on a Saturday afternoon and they phone the dentist, and the dentist says, I charge double on a Saturday, they will go because they're desperate. Please, I'll meet you at your offices, get rid of this pain, all right? And of course, if you like Coca-Cola and you have the dominant brand equity, you can get away with it to a degree. And then, of course, if you have a powerful loyalty program. All of these are categories of things where customers pay much more than what they actually should, because there's a perception over here that they actually are getting better value. But there are others as well. And remember, I said perceptions are so important. We have a situation where we probably, and I have to put myself right at the front of the queue here, we pay a lot more for status or prestige or power. If I take a look at, you know, why I live in the suburb I live in, it makes me proud to say I live in the suburb. When I take a look at sending my kids to a private school, I send my kids to a private school because I can afford it. So there's a certain prestige that goes with being able to afford those things. And does it mean that my children will get a lesser education at a cheaper school? Probably not. Okay, it's, you know, for the amount that we're paying, which is, you know, 8 or 10 times more to go to a private school, are they getting 8 or 10 times of a better education experience? No, but it doesn't matter. It's about something deeper than that. Things which are fashionable or faddish, you know, I've got to have it because it's so fashionable right now. Teenagers fall into this trap, and dare I say it, you know, women fall into this trap. But just in case you think that men don't do it, for us, it's not necessarily the latest lipstick color or the latest nail polish or the latest shoes or the latest color of outfit. It's about gizmos. It's about gadgets. So we've got to have, you know, the upgrade to this thing. I can't have my old phone. I can't have my old computer. I've got to get the latest, greatest. I've got to have a PS5 now if I'm a gamer. So things which become fashions and that give a statement that I'm cool over here. Of course, when it's something that is exclusive, unique, or one of a kind, we just had the Deb's Ball at my son's school, and fortunately I don't have daughters, okay, but some of those girls spent something like in the region of about 15 to 20,000 Rand for an outfit that they wore for the better part of about 10 hours. You see, it was a very special event. It was their coming out party. There was a bunch of teenagers who were now, you know, acknowledged as adults, and the parents paid a fortune in money. Now, my son knows who his dad is. He said, Dad, don't worry, we don't need to buy a suit. We'll just hire one. And in fact, because I'm such a stingy, tight bastard, as my wife calls me, okay, what happens is that we didn't rent a suit, but we borrowed from a friend who's the same size as my son. Okay, he was only going to wear it for a few hours, and it was the cost of dry cleaning the thing afterwards. All right. And of course, when we buy on impulse, and this is one of my weaknesses, somebody will recommend a book. I'll go onto Amazon, and it's just too easy to buy it on Amazon. I do look at the, look inside part, and I look to see, hey, is it interesting? I read the first couple of pages. Yep, got to have this one. And I've got this collection of books. Why? Because I'm a book lover, and Amazon makes it easy. And then finally, we have the emotional purchases. And please excuse me for a second, folks. My apologies. My apologies. Emotional purchases are those purchases where a very strong feeling exists inside of us. So, for example, guilt is an emotional purchase where we spend a lot of money. Guilt is a negative emotion. Fear is a negative emotion. We probably spend too much, for example, in our country, in certain cultures, on funerals, okay, because we want to give our loved one a good send-off, okay? So those are some of the things. And then, of course, there's the positive emotions, like a sense of pride. My youngest won an award at school recently, okay, and it wasn't good enough to take a photograph on the iPhone. We paid a lot of money to the photographer who was assigned by the school to take photographs. Okay, the photograph is no different than I would have taken, but I didn't mind. I was proud that my boy had actually won an award. That's what we're talking about. So all of these cause customers then to probably spend much more than they should have. And it's really about perceptions. If we go back to cosmetics again, I don't think that my wife is getting a good deal when she buys her products. In her particular case, it's Clinique products, all right? I think it's an absolute ripoff. But in my wife's opinion, she's saying, no, I understand it's expensive, but you know what? It's worth it. I'm worth it. And that's where it becomes almost irrational. We've spoken about that many times. The other corner is also an interesting corner because now, particularly now in the last couple of years with the pandemic and everything, more and more businesses are saying, hang on. We know that our customers simply cannot afford those high prices, but we are determined to give them a great experience. And so the blue ocean is not necessarily about lowering your prices. In fact, I have a very big problem with lowering prices just for the sake of capturing market share. What I'm saying here is that if we look at it in terms of the value, not the prices, the value, what we do, for example, is we throw in a lot of additional value for our customers, and we're not saying we're going to give it to you dirt cheap. We're saying you will still pay quite a high price, but I'm going to throw in these things for free, and they will hopefully add value for you. And in my particular case, what I throw in for free is reports that I've created, white papers. I'll do a free session for them as a follow-up session. I mean, if they've taken the trouble to book me for 5 days in their companies, the least I can do is go back in 6 months and do a 1 hour follow-up session. So there's a whole range of things because I want them to say, hey, this Aki fellow is unique. He offers something much better than any other consultant. And so we spoke at quite a few examples last week. I told you about the Fiji Chinese restaurant in Norwood that will throw in some extra free rice if you do a doggy bag. All right, so folks, so it's very, very possible to create a lot of perceived value at not much cost to your business. And that's what gets customers to come back again and again and again. Here's an example, somebody that you might know. There's a printer in Norwood run by a lady by the name of Glenda. And one Christmas a few years ago, this goes back to when I was still quite overweight. So this goes back probably about 6 years, all right, 6-7 years. And what happens is I received with a printing job that we'd given her, there was a big envelope, and inside I saw The Economist magazine, and I was on the cover. And I promise you, for about 2 seconds, I really thought I was on the cover of The Economist. What had actually happened is they downloaded the typical Economist cover, but then they went and somehow found a photograph of me. Oh, and by the way, they phoned the office first of all, and they said, well, what does Aki read usually? Does he read National Geographic or Time magazine or what? And the guys at the office said, no, but we do know that he subscribes to The Economist. Great, thank you very much. They then downloaded a photograph, which was on my website. They put together this little thing. I don't know, it was probably for her team 3 or 4 minutes work. They then printed it, which for them is again pretty cheap. They then went and spent about 35 Rand to buy an Economist magazine, the latest one from Woolies or wherever they bought it, and they then gave it to me with my next print job. Customer of the year, and it was unanimous. And, it just was so fantastic that they actually took the trouble to do that. It didn't cost them a lot. And as far as I know, they might have done it 200 times for their 200 customers. It doesn't matter. It made me feel special. And afterwards, I went to Glenda with the next job and I said, Glenda, you really didn't need to do that. I'll support you because you're good at what you do and so on. And she said, oh, no, Aki, you're our favorite customer. And every time you come in here, we have a bit of a laugh. And, if we miss a deadline, we know it's not the end of the world and you're going to forgive us for it. We love you. You're our favorite customer. So you can see that now there's a partnership. I feel an obligation because she was so nice to me. I feel an obligation to actually support her business and to tell literally tens of thousands of other people about Glenda and her business. That's what we're talking about over here. All right. Another good example is if you take a look at the humble little coffee bean. It begins its life as a commodity on a coffee farm somewhere in Northern Africa or in Brazil or Costa Rica or any one of those countries. It's not worth very much at that stage. But then that farmer will harvest their coffee. So what happens is now they actually have added value through their labor. It now becomes a good, okay, it goes into a big 50-kilogram sack and they put it onto a lorry and the lorry takes it to a factory. In that factory, which is owned by Nestle or any one of those other companies, they then take those coffee beans and they turn it into a product. Now it is worth something. And depending on where you and I shop, all right, you can buy a bottle or a packet of coffee. If you drink something like FG or ripoff, you probably are paying somewhere around 20-30 cents a cup. If you are going to buy a Nescafe, you're probably paying something like 60 cents a cup. And if you want George Clooney in your kitchen and you buy those little capsules of coffee for your George Clooney machine, then you're probably paying 8 or 9 Rand a cup to have this coffee at home. So as a commodity, it was worthless. As a good, that poor farmer probably sells it for the better part of 3 or 4 cents a cup. But as a product, it's between 20 and 30 cents a cup. All right. And then what happens, okay, is you'll get that same cup of coffee at a very run-of-the-mill, medium quality coffee shop for 20 Rand. In fact, at Wimpy now, you are paying, I think, if I'm not mistaken, 26 Rand for a cup of coffee. And yet nobody resents it. Nobody actually says, oh, did you see that Wimpy put their prices up now? I'm not going back there again. We pay it willingly because Wimpy now have added the element of, hey, come in and we'll look after your car while you're inside and we will serve you and we'll treat you well and you can look at all the other customers looking at you usually, okay? And when you finish, just leave it all lying there and we'll clean up after you. So it makes it worthwhile. And a lot of people say to me, oh, but that Wimpy coffee is so nice. Like, I wonder if they put drugs in it or something. No, they don't. Okay, they use evaporated milk. That's their secret. But it just tastes fantastic. And because we paid more for it, it tastes better. And then, of course, to take it even one step further, you can go to one of those really expensive Starbucks type coffee places. You go to the Starbucks at Melrose Arch, it's now an experience, and you're looking for that same cup of coffee, 40, 45, 50 Rand, 60 Rand. If you have a tot of something in it, it could go up to 80 Rand. We pay it willingly. So from starting off as almost a valueless item, it becomes something which is exactly the same thing, a cup of coffee, but it is now an experience. That's what should give you hope, because as small businesses, this is what we can do incredibly well through personalization and customization. In fact, Ted Levitt, who was a very famous marketing professor at Harvard Business School, he said there's no such thing as a commodity. We need to do that. And just 2 more quick examples. You can go and buy raw potatoes at the Johannesburg produce market for 5.50 Rand a kilogram. Got mud on them. You've got to wake up at 4 o'clock in the morning to be there at the farmer's market. But then what happens is you can buy those same potatoes for double the price at Pick n Pay. Pick n Pay takes them, they clean them up. They say you don't have to, we'll take out the bad bits. You don't have to travel all the way to the market. You can come up till 6 o'clock at night and we'll put them in a nice bag for you. And now the price is double. And then you get McCain's who say, we'll take those same potatoes, we'll clean them up, we'll cut them up, and then we'll power roast them or something, and we'll now charge you 28 Rand 50. So now it's gone to 6 times the price. All right. In fact, if you have those McCain's thin chips, you're probably paying close to about 48 Rand per kilogram. But they taste so nice. You're getting almost restaurant quality chips at home for 40, 45, 50 Rand a kilogram. But of course, it gets worse, because now if you go to, say, for example, steers, you're paying, and these numbers are probably outdated now, 83 Rand a kilogram. Now, I'll show you how I know. If you take the steers menu, there it is. There's the chips, hand-cut chips. And if you believe that they're hand-cut, then you probably believe that the cow jumped over the moon as well, okay? It's not really about hand-cut chips, okay? But what happens if you're buying chips for the whole family, there it is, 26 Rand for the large. The large is somewhere around 300 odd grams, okay, per 330 grams. So to make up 1 kilogram, you've got to multiply, 30, 29, 90, what is it, 26 Rand times 3 Rand, and that's how you get to 83 Rand. I mean, it's crazy. And yet we say, oh, no, but the steer chips are so nice. They're fluffy in the middle and they're crispy on the outside. No, I don't care. We'll get them. And we, of course, get far too many steers chips, or, Nando's, or wherever it is that we go and pick up chips. And does it get worse? Of course it does, because Simba doesn't even sell chips by the kilogram. They sell them by the gram. And you now are paying a heck of a lot more than 83 Rand a kilogram for Simba crisps, okay? And of course, if you really like your crisps, Pringles are even more expensive. And you want to know the secret over here. Here's the little dirty secret about Pringles. About 3% of Pringles is actually made from potatoes, okay? Look on the pack next time. When you see all those little things about the container, you will see that it's got a whole bunch of other things, including a whole bunch of chemicals. There's hardly any potatoes in Pringles, yet nobody resents it. We pay it when we can afford it. Here's a final example. Here's my latest cell phone. If you wanted to buy the cell phone, you can go to Take a Lot or one of those. And as you can see over here, you can buy a secondhand cell phone for somewhere around 1,500 Rand. Okay, about 1,600 Rand. Okay. But I'm going to show you some magic. I'm telling you now that this old cell phone of mine, which probably needs a battery replacement, okay, at this stage, you would be quite happy to offer me 10,000, maybe even 20,000 Rand for my phone. And I'll tell you why, okay? Why would you pay it? First of all, it's got about 678, the last time I counted, top business contacts, okay? My clients, the important people, 678 important people. You've got their immediate details, their WhatsApp, their telephone number, addresses, email addresses. I've got 63 Kindle books, last time I counted, could be more by now, okay? Mostly business books on customer experience, okay? And a whole bunch of other apps, including Zoom and so on. I'm a keen astronomist. I like the skies and so on. So there's an astronomy app over there. I do my bank accounts via my cell phone. I've got flight schedules, a backup of my slides in case I arrive and, my laptop got stolen or broke down. I always keep backup of my slides for conferences on my phone. I've got my 200 favorite rock songs from the 1970s on my phone, okay? And also a whole bunch of my favorite marketing podcasts. Now, if you got your hands on my phone, you would willingly pay 20,000 Rand for that phone. If you're one of my competitors, quite happy to get that. You see, it's not the phone itself, it's what's inside the phone which is important, okay? So that's how the perception of the experience is what it's all about. And the aim of marketing is to plan it so well through value innovation and so on, so that the job of selling, as I said, is superfluous. Now, this serves as a nice bridge to where we are going, because now for the rest of the session, I would like to talk about sales, okay, and what can make your sales process easier. You see, we have a situation where we are seeing the death of hope marketing. What is hope marketing? Hope marketing is that desperate, please buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. That was appropriate. And there are still some organizations that do it via radio stations, via television stations, and so on. There's this begging, please buy my stuff. And of course, needless to say, because of email being so incredibly cheap, there are literally hundreds of these things that arrive in my inbox every day. The only way around this is to once in a while, once every 5 or 6 years, change my email address. But that's inconvenient, okay? But there's this desperate begging, okay, of buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. And unfortunately, those days are over, okay? I've blocked so many companies, but they keep pouring in. So what's the alternative then? What is the alternative to all this, okay? Well, it comes through the power of stories and conversations, okay? So for example, one of the things that I do is before I even talk or think about selling anything, I contact people, particularly cold prospects, people who've never known anything about who I am, never encountered me before. And I say to them, I'm in the process of launching a new training package, and I'm really excited to get this going. But before I create the course, I want to make sure I really cover everything. And your opinion is so important to me. Please, could you help me out and just let me ask you just one question. And that question is, what is your number one challenge when it comes to customer experience? That's it. We're on a conversation for the better part of maybe 30, 40 seconds, but the seed has been planted. All right. I've honored them by asking their opinion. I've not threatened them by saying, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. All I've done is I've said, you're going to make my life a little bit easier by just telling me what your one biggest challenge is. And so from that perspective, this is what makes it so powerful. That's what gives you hope in the alternative over there. You see, when it comes to what we are talking about, because you have made customers these unbelievable offers, okay, they talk about you and you don't need to sell them anything. In fact, you know, the figures go something like this, that on average, one delighted, thrilled, excited customer will tell on average 3 others. Could be higher, depends on the industry. If it's something like, for example, a show that people go to or a new record or a new movie, the figures might be higher. If it's somebody who buys, you know, some stationery for the office, it might be a little bit lower. But let's work with the average of 3. Those 3 people will in turn tell somebody else, okay? And so what happens is, so we continue, and then suddenly from just one good experience, it could be 60, 70, 80, 90 people who hear about this. Not only that, but this original individual, in my particular case, for example, may resign from their company and go to another company with a promotion. And they'll call me, if I've stayed in touch with them, and they will say, hey, Aki, come and talk to my new team. So this is where it becomes so important. And you remember I used the barrel analogy we spoke about how this is so expensive, the process of getting customers into your barrel. I use the analogy of chasing chickens, all right? But at the end of the day, all right, we need to, you know, understand that hope marketing is very expensive, all right? We've got to plug the leaks, which is really what the last 2 sessions have been about, create unbelievable experiences by adding value, and understand that the best source of new business is always, always, always our old customers, our current and past customers. So the power of referrals is what gets you out of this cold calling thing. And I'd like to just share with you a quick story over here. When I've been running my business for about 36 years now, the first 5 or 6 years, like in any business, were not tough, but they were harder than they were until the COVID pandemic started. And what happened was I used to hate cold calling. I thought to myself, you know, I'm a professional, you know, I don't need this in my life. I just wish customers would come to me. I know I've got a great product over there. I know that I'm enthusiastic. I know that I can turn people on and inspire them. But if they don't know about it, well, I've got to tell them. And it was very hard. I just didn't enjoy it. But when I looked at our numbers about 5, 6 years after starting the business, I suddenly realized that somewhere between 50 and 60% of all the business I was getting came from people who already knew me. They could have been my old colleagues in the last company I worked for. It could have been clients have moved on and so on. And I made a decision that as soon as possible, I wanted my business to be 100% referral based. It took a couple of years, but I would like to share with you what my strategy was. You see, it's like a magnet. When you get the strategy right, it attracts customers. How do you manage this? It cannot be random, obviously, it's planned for. But when you take a look at how long you need to spend on it, if it's half an hour a week, I'd be surprised. Because what happens, okay, is that it requires a bit of planning up front, and then it's just a routine updating of the stuff. And you, most importantly, don't have to feel icky about the hard sales. You don't have to think, you know, be embarrassed and humiliated by people rejecting you and so on. So what is the process? It's about keeping in touch with your customers. That's the reality of it, okay? We keep in touch with all of our customers. Now, it's not as simple as this, but that's the starting off point, all right? You see, it's a process of called Do You Remember Me? And by the way, I've got a last few copies of a book which I wrote called Relationships First, which describes this thing. It's a little business novel. If you write to me, I will send you a copy or bring it to you if you're in Johannesburg or nearby. But what happens, okay, it's 4 simple steps. And the first few steps are where it takes a few hours. It doesn't take a few minutes, it takes a few hours. But the first rule is what I call the 250 by 250 principle. It goes something like this, okay? You probably know 250 people reasonably well. They're in your community. They might be business connections, they may be friends, family members, people that you were at school with, and so on. It's not who you know, however, that's important. It's who they know. And if we take a look at it and say, well, they know probably around 250 people, now suddenly you're looking at a potential market of 62,500 prospects. That's a whole stadium, a large stadium full of people. But even if we crossed it out and we said, hey, how about if we make it 100 by 100? You know 100 people that you're comfortable to connect with. They know 100 people that could recommend you. That still brings out 10,000 potential prospects. So you can see where the power of this lies. But now you've got to take it one step further. I call it A, B, C, and D your list. You take those 250 or 100. I'm going to stick with 100 because it makes a little bit more sense in terms of the percentages. And first of all, you identify the A's. Usually on any list that you make, there will be somewhere around between 10 and 15 A's. The A's are not your biggest customers that donate the most money towards your business. No, the A customers are those who love you so much, and connections, by the way, not only customers. They are those who love you so much that they will unhesitatingly give you a referral. If you phone them right now and said, hey, I'm looking to expand my business, I want to scale it up a little bit, is there somebody who you think could benefit from my services? Without a second of pause, they will say, sure, here are some people, connect them and use my name if you want to, okay? They love you. The B's are those that you know that you've encountered, they've experienced what you do, they know a little bit more about you, and they are positive, but you know that you need to work a little bit on them. You know that they're going to say, I could just give me a couple of days to think about it, all right? The C's are those that you still have some distance to go. For example, the delegates on courses that I run, okay, are the C's. People that I encounter on a day-to-day basis are the C's. And your job is to get the C's to become B's and the B's to become A's. So if this is 10 to 15%, this is probably 20 to 25%, and then this is around 60%, maybe even more. Who are the D's? There are some people that you need to delete off your list. We sometimes spend a lot of time, particularly in social media, chasing people that will never buy from us, okay? Now, do I ignore them? Of course not. I have a standard newsletter that goes out. It's an occasional newsletter. I've got them on a database. There are about 7,500 of them. I post on LinkedIn mainly and so on. They can see my stuff if they want to, but if they want something from me, and you'll see what I mean in the next 2 items, if they want something from me, they have to come to me, all right? I don't go to them. They've got to come to me. So the next step then is to then in every communication with the A's and the B's in particular, but also with the C's, you'll see that any email that I send to you ends off with these lines. And if there's anything else that I can help you with, anything at all, please just let me know. And so from that perspective, folks, my whole principle is then to say to people, please, I want to help you. I've got tons of resources. In fact, I think I made this promise to you last week. I've got hard drives full of stuff. I've got cabinets, filing cabinets full of stuff. The worst that could happen is that I won't be able to help you, but just ask. All you need to do is just let me know and I'll help you. But I'll also do that proactively, as you will see in the final step, okay? The second part of please just let me know is when they are eventually A's, and I know they are supporters and they've given me good referrals in the past, or they are very positive, or for example, they have agreed to, videotape some testimony and to recommend me, okay? Then at a time which is appropriate, at a time when I'm comfortable with it and they're comfortable with it, I will say to them something like, and if there's anybody else that you think could benefit from my services, please just let me know. Folks, I cannot tell you how powerful this is. I cannot emphasize how successful this strategy is. And what happens, okay, is that this is what leads to zero cold calling. You may never have to cold call again. You see, we always look at the mass amounts of advertising that come, over DSTV or the radio stations or in the newspapers or magazines. But we always forget that if we were making it personal, and Seth Godin is very hot on this, that we can actually make it much easier. Now, to make this a little bit easier, and because my mind needs structure, we have a consistent campaign. And this is what mine looks like. Initially, by the way, at the beginning, it was literally a big whiteboard in the office, probably the size of the wall. And what would happen is we'd have week by week by week. So this is week 1, from the 1st of January to the 7th of January, 2, 3, 52 weeks in a year. And then we would list all the A clients. Now, this happens on an Excel spreadsheet now, but we have all the A clients, okay? Somewhere between 5 and 15% of my A clients, okay? And the first thing I do is I try and highlight some areas where I have an excuse to stay in touch with them. So for example, they have a birthday. I find out what the birthday is. You can get it on social media, or you can get it by asking a secretary or just asking them directly, okay? There are also, for example, some religious holidays. So for example, on my Jewish clients, I know that there are certain days when they celebrate. I know with the Christian clients that there's Easter and there's Christmas. I know with Muslim clients that there's Eid. So there's always some religious holiday where you have an excuse to connect with them, okay? And then there are a whole bunch of other opportunities, anniversaries, for example. So I keep track of when was the first time I ever did business with this client, and then I let them know that they had an anniversary over there. All right, so what we do is then we say, right, with the A clients, I want to stay in touch with my A clients at least. I want to remind them of my presence at least once every 6 weeks, if not every month. So you can see now that over here, there are a lot of gaps over there. So now I've got to start filling these in. All right, and this is where now it becomes important. What I do is I have a whole bunch of Google alerts out. So the Google alert will have all of their names, all right? So for example, one of my connections is a chap called Arnold Prinsloo. I get Arnold Prinsloo, I do a Google alert. If he ever appears in the media or on a LinkedIn post or wherever it is, I know about it. So I follow Arnold on LinkedIn. If he posts something, LinkedIn kindly lets me know. I go to his post, it's literally one click, and I will put a little like or a smile or something, and I will write 2 sentences. Hey, Arnold, what an insightful point. Fantastic. It's so well deserved. Recently, they won an award for some advertising that they did. Hey, Arnold, I'm not surprised, but fantastic. Thank you for putting a smile on our faces. So every once in a while, I'm reminding him, hey, Aki's still around. Who's going to be the first one that he thinks about? All right, when he needs something. So I do that for all the A clients. And, there's a limited amount of time in the day, but we got to do that. The B's are those who I want to hook in as clients. So for example, one of the companies I'm really chasing at the moment is Vodacom. I've got about 32 connections at Vodacom, but I'm still not quite sure who would be the person who books me and signs the checks. But slowly, those B's, I stay in touch with them. Another Google alert that I have out is, for example, on a typical topic. So I've got a Google alert out, a Scholar alert out that says, if anything is published about customer experience in the mobile phone industry, I want to find out about it. Please let me know. And Google actually sends me an email every single day saying, hey, a new paper was published over here. A new webinar was done. A new academic published a research report on, customer experience in the mobile industry. It takes me 5 seconds to scan that document. And then I ask myself, who on my list of A or Bs would benefit from this thing? And so I just forward the thing. I say, hey, listen, if this thing is just not adding value for you, please let me know and I'll stop it immediately. But I picked up this article recently and I thought you might enjoy it. That's it. And if there's anything that you need, anything at all, please just let me know. And I sign it and I send it out. So the B's I contact at least once every 2 months. Again, social media has made a big difference over here. But the point I'm making over here is that I want to turn these B's into A's. They get such a regular reminder that when I do want to turn them into A's, they are ready for it. They know who I am, and it's not cold calling. And then the C's are the others where I've got to contact them at least once every 3 months, again with Google Alerts, etc., etc. I've got a database on an Excel spreadsheet. I'm now, in fact, putting it onto a formal CRM system, and I'm able to respond to that. So folks, on a little spreadsheet, you can do it and do yourself a big favor over there. Just a couple of little notes, a couple of little things to remember. Always be adding value, even if it's for no obvious reason, and obvious return as well. I think the whole point that I've keep making, I think I've said this 20 times in the last few weeks, you know, you've got to give in order to get. The second one is use social media and alerts, Google Scholar alerts, Google alerts. There are so many things that you can do. Always an excuse to talk. There's always an excuse. This month we had Valentine's Day, the month of love. But every month there is some day, you know, there's spaghetti day, there's donuts day, there is boss's day, and there's secretary's day. I never let secretary's day pass without sending a handful of secretaries something nice, either a free book or some flowers or some chocolate or a card or even just a note saying, hey, happy secretary's day. I wish you worked for me, you know, type of thing. So just anything to make them feel good about themselves. But there's always an excuse to talk. And by the way, secretaries are in some cases more powerful than their bosses, because the boss will say, get me a list of speakers for our next conference, and the secretary, guess who she's going to contact. All right. Special events in their lives. Okay. Once again, you know, Facebook in particular lets you know when they got engaged, married, when they had another child, when they won an award, all sorts of things, when they post on LinkedIn, etc. Things that they are passionate about, obviously. And as long as you're not creepy, and that is, you know, there's a fine line over there. If they resist, you've got to be able to back off. I am so sorry. I didn't mean this to happen. And I completely respect your decision. I bet you're overwhelmed. The last thing you want is to hear from me. I had one yesterday. There's a lady at Take a Lot who's responsible for the customer experience at Take a Lot. I sent her a private LinkedIn mail with the credits that I have, and I said to her, I would be very grateful if you'd agree to connect with me on LinkedIn. And she said no. I wrote back to her. I said, dear Chantal, I completely understand. I can imagine that you're incredibly busy, and I respect that, and you will never hear from me again. That's it. It's not the end of the world if they don't want to be in touch with you. And I'll not be able to remind her, but maybe by saying, hey, I got this letter from this chap, you know, with a strange name, maybe next time she's on LinkedIn and she sees that I've posted something, maybe she'll remember, maybe not, it doesn't matter. Maybe she'll move on. Maybe my name will come up in another context, okay? That's what it's all about. So it's really about respecting them and not being creepy. So the world of marketing, let's now get into some real specific. I have to tell you that for 35, in fact, more than 35, probably 40 years now, I've been in the world of marketing. And yet when the digital marketing came along, everything seemed to be turned on its head. The terminology was weird, and there were words like secrets and KLTs, you know, no, like, and trust, and all sorts of things that I just didn't understand. And it was just so confusing. And literally after studying harder the world of digital marketing for about 3 years, and folks, let me tell you, I put more effort into studying this digital marketing than I put into my MBA all those years ago. All right. It was absolutely scary because I knew I was completely incompetent. And then one day I suddenly had a realization, hang on. This is the same. The old marketing still applies. The terminology has changed. After thousands and thousands of hours, I realized that being unique, solving customer problems, adding value, having great copywriting, forming personal relationships, choosing your segments, using the power of word of mouth, perceptions, all of those things still applied. What had changed was the medium and the language. And I remember a little adage that I learned 40 years ago in my very first sales job at Adcock Ingram, all those years ago. And this little thing went like this: he who has a thing to sell and goes and whispers in a well is not so apt to get the dollars as he who climbs a tree and hollers. And now we can't go and shout in their ear and beg them, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff, buy my stuff. But what we can do is use the power of social media in particular, but also the power of emails to add value, but let them know that we're around, because familiarity doesn't bring contempt. Breed contempt. Familiarity breeds liking. Familiarity makes them understand that, hey, this young Kalliatakis fellow added value for me, all right? So the business world may have fundamentally changed. And there's three things that have changed substantially. First of all, the speed of communication. I remember if I sent out an invitation to breakfasts in the old days, to get 250 people crammed into a hotel ballroom for a breakfast, we knew we had to send out 10,000 invitations, okay? We had to print out 10,000 invitations, buy 10,000 envelopes, get them, through to the post office. And the first and biggest challenge was spending time filling those envelopes with those invitations, folding the invitations, shoving it into an envelope. Let me tell you something. We have a big dining room table. We had everybody connected with us. My whole family would sit there. I even had my dad, who was a pensioner, my dear old late dad. He was coming and stuffing envelopes. The domestic lady who worked at our house. All of us sat around there for days at a time, stuffing envelopes and then taking them in piles to the post office to be posted to our clients. Usually in the post office in those days, somewhere around 500 of those 10,000 came back, either because the address was unknown or something had changed. And then we'd start getting a trickle of comments in. And then we knew that now, in 2 months' time, we're going to have 250 people at our breakfast. Okay. It was a tedious process. So the first thing has changed is the speed of communication. The second one is the cost of communication. We were working then off a cost of about R1.50 per envelope. So it's a lot of money. Today, with an email, it could be, literally just a few cents, but also on a post, it's absolutely free. I do happen to have LinkedIn Premium Sales Navigator, but at the end of the day, all right, the posts are free. Posting on LinkedIn and becoming an influencer is free. And then the third thing that has changed is interactivity. Now I can connect with them and engage with them. So yes, the business world has fundamentally, deeply changed, but the marketing principles are the same. And the why and the what have not changed. It's just the how that has changed. The how and the who have changed. And so from that perspective, at the front end, at the top of the funnel, as many people call it, the customer acquisition, all right? If they know you through that process of keeping in touch that I mentioned to you, well, we got it made, all right? But we have some processes that are important. And I'd like to also just share with you at this stage that there are 3 ways of acquiring people onto your database. Your database is probably the most precious thing in your business, or will be at some stage. First of all, there is the paid front end. And what I'm talking about over there is that you can pay to get what is now called traffic. You can pay a lot of money to Google, Facebook, YouTube, LinkedIn, to advertise on their sites and to put out some form of communication where people then send you their email addresses, okay? But you are going to be clubbed, okay? And it's not only the cost of it where it's by auction. So if somebody's looking for the term customer experience on Facebook, okay, I'm probably going to need to pay somewhere around 12 Rand for anybody who just clicks on that advert. Never mind sends me their email address. They just click on it and it's going to cost me 12 Rand. You know what I'm saying over there. It's very expensive. Not only that, though, they also keep changing the algorithms, okay? So you never know when you're going to be clubbed, and it's called the Google slap in America, where what happens is they change the algorithm and suddenly you say, but nothing's happening. Nobody, because they changed something in their algorithm and they didn't bother to inform you. It's a terrible place to be, okay? But sometimes I understand you need to be dramatic. The second type of media are the so-called earned ones, okay? And it includes commenting on other people's sites. It includes obviously posting. It's about, guesting people. I don't have a podcast at the moment. I don't like podcasts. To make one point usually takes half an hour. I'd much rather just read the thing, but I do interview a lot of people, and then I would summarize what they've said, okay, in a few lines, and then post that mostly on LinkedIn, okay? But you can also earn the right to names by doing a joint venture with somebody. So there are a lot of people who are competitors of mine who I'd prefer to see as partners. And what would happen is there some way that they would be able to give me their list, lend me their list one time with something going back to them? All right. So it's much, much better than Google and Facebook and all the rest of them. But at the same time, it is also something where they're getting something in return. So even though I pay them, and usually this is by an affiliate fee. So in other words, if somebody writes to me and says, I was listening to, or I watched something from, Joe Bloggs' website, and he recommended I call you, and here's my email address, they get paid for that. And in that particular case, I really don't mind paying that 12 Rand a name. Why? Because the JV has credibility. The person who recommended me has credibility, and it makes that money well spent over there. All right. So like me, you're probably very protective of your database, but you can make money from it. And I'm very careful when people ask to use my database. All right. But the best is the owned media. Okay. And that then is obviously when you own that name, you own that email address. And we'll talk very briefly about how you get that going. Okay. So if you can get a new customer and break even on the cost of acquiring that customer, it's fantastic. I'm very happy to actually break even because the money follows later because of that value equation that I showed you earlier. You get something for free, and then they can buy a book for $10, and then they can come to a webinar for another, say $30 and so on. You see, for the past 3,500 years of recorded history, the answer has always been pretty simple. You want to grow your business, get more customers, get them to buy more frequently, and get those customers to spend more when they buy. And this is where the value of your email database lies. You see, at the end of the day, okay, when you create that sales funnel, and I'm going to define a sales funnel in a minute, you offer them a lot of freebies at the beginning. Freebies, particularly, that don't cost you a lot. All right, cost you nothing. In fact, I'm quite often sitting there for a half an hour to 45 minutes on an exploratory call, a discovery call with a client, and I want to just, at the end of that half an hour, I want them to say, wow, I really learned a lot, Aki, thank you very much. And if they don't buy, that's fine. I'm absolutely fine with that, because I know that a big proportion of those people who I spent that half an hour, that 45 minutes with, they are going to feel a sense of obligation, and they will look at, returning the favor over there. And I'm not doing it manipulatively. All right. So what is a sales funnel? It's much more than just a website. It's not a glorified brochure. It's not having a salesperson getting to stand outside and handing out brochures. That's not what a sales funnel is. A funnel is a series of steps that you ask someone to take, usually online, but it works just as well in real life, to go from not knowing who the heck you are to becoming a paying customer. All right. Now I've got a trick over here. Now I've given you 3 simple steps, but of course this part, okay, could be 5 or 6 contacts, 5 or 6 times when you engage with them before they actually buy something. All right. But they don't know who you are. Then they know who you are, but they're not willing to buy anything. They don't see the value at this stage. And we'll talk about that in a couple of minutes, but eventually with a bit of luck, they'll buy something. What are the proportions? Well, in real life, I know that I've got to have something like, connect about 30 people in order to get 5 people to agree to talk to me, okay, to get 1 sales meeting. And I'm lucky because my sales conversion face-to-face or via Zoom is as close as you're going to get to 1-to-1. Okay, there are some that don't sign up, and I'm happy for that, but really it's 1-to-1. So my strike rate is 30-to-1. That's what I know. Okay. In other cases, it might be 100-to-1, or if you're not going to talk to them, might be 1,000-to-1. All right. So the most important customer needs, wants, interests, desires, and so on. I'm going to go through this quickly. You're going to get this in your handouts. Can you make them or save them some money? The return on investment. All right. And the same with time. They're going to spend a lot of time with you, perhaps, maybe half an hour, maybe more. Can you give them more time or reduce their effort in some way? What can you do to make them better? How are they going to be better people because of you? What are their fears and hassles? What are the things that keep them awake at night? What are the dangers and risks that they're worried about? A new law that just got passed. Whatever it is. Right now, this morning on the news, I heard that there's an outbreak of typhoid or something. Now in the back of my mind, I'm worrying, must I drink the water from the taps? It's irrational, okay? But anybody who climbs in with that and says and does something about it is going to reassure me, okay? So what causes their headaches? And what are they missing out on? Are they falling behind? What's the FOMO, the fear of missing out? Maybe that's what it is, particularly with younger people. Reputation, can you make them look good with others? Is this something that they can go and boast to their families, their friends, their colleagues about, all right? And is there personal growth? Will they feel good about themselves? Will they sleep better at night for doing good? And part of that process is I just bought a book on Amazon again yesterday. And one of the main reasons when I looked at the first few pages, I was, yeah, whatever. But then I read that all the proceeds of this book, every single dollar of profit goes towards animal rescue. And I thought, well, that's one of the causes that I love. And I bought the book just because it made me feel good about that. So I've got the content and it looks okay, but I've also, sleep better at night. All right, folks. So those are some of the things that you can work on. So let me share with you a quick story over here. A few years ago, a young man wanted to sell me a gas braai. And he phoned me and he said, oh, Mr. Kalliatakis, I'd love, just half an hour of your wife and your time. I'll come to your house anytime. I'll do it after dinner if I have to. And I said, what's it for? He says, no, I don't want to take away the surprise, but I promise you it'll be worth your while. Eventually, just to get rid of him because he was so persistent, he must have called 10 times in a period of about a year. I said, okay, just come, we finish supper at around 6, come after 6 and we'll give you a cup of coffee and talk. So when he got there, he immediately launches into this whole thing about gas braais. Okay, I've got this gas braai and, I'm going to put up the picture now and this is what it does and this and that and it's easy to clean and, it's at the flick of a switch. You can, start braaiing immediately and it's safe and blah, blah, blah. He goes into all the features and all the benefits and all the advantages of this gas braai. So I said to him, and what does this all cost? Okay. So he said, well, we've got the standard version, which was about 6,500 Rand. And then we've got the deluxe, which is 12,000 Rand. I said, what? For a braai? Are you crazy? And eventually we just said to him, look, you're wasting your time. It's not going to happen. But you see, he asked the wrong questions. You see, what happened was, if he'd asked at the beginning, what does braai mean to you, Mr. Kalliatakis? He would understand that I am somebody who's very keen on braais. In fact, I can tell you not a week goes by in my house without a braai. Sometimes, or mostly it's on Sundays, but sometimes it's a power failure. Sometimes, in the middle of the week, my wife will say, I just don't feel like cleaning. So we braai. I do it regularly. And the ritual is always the same. I take my kids and we go to the garden and we collect the twigs that have dried and some wood that I cut down last winter, which is now dry, and we haul out the braai. And there's this whole ritual of putting on the newspapers and then the small twigs and then the bigger branches and then the wood. And we have the bag of charcoal ready. And it's time I spend with my children. I know that my eldest, who's now 18, he's going to leave home in a matter of weeks, maybe months. And I just treasure my time that I have with him. My youngest is 12 and so on. And we just have time together and we listen to music and I teach them about braaiing and I show them the rule. It's called the 5-second rule. If you can hold your hand for 5 seconds above the coal, then the coal is ready. You see, it's about something much deeper than let's throw some burri on the braai. Okay. And I think from that perspective, he didn't understand what braai means to me. You see, it's not about switch on it, switch and braai your meat. It's about something much deeper. Now that happened 10 years ago. In the process now, as I get a little bit older and I'm losing my first son he's going to be studying. And what happens is I've got my second son, but I'm also starting to feel old and, going around the garden and picking up bits of wood and, blowing the flames and all of that. It's getting a little bit tedious, but not only that, every time I light this fire, I always look at the smoke in the sky and I think to myself, man, you're not really contributing to the environmental movement. You're creating problems. You're burning wood. No, this is not so environmentally friendly. I'm more open to a gas braai right now, but he wasn't there. You see, he hadn't stayed in touch with me. He just gave up after that first rejection. And I think there's so many nice lessons in a story like that. You see, it's about your messages. I think it's really about, 3 or 4 key things. Okay, you need to start by asking, what is my unique mechanism? And then you have to be very clear about your big marketing idea. Now, I've got a slide that lists these things. Okay, here's a screenshot of a book. Okay, the book is called by Lama Jabber, How to Outsourcing Business for Profit Explained. Okay, if I saw this book on Amazon, and I probably have, I'm not interested. Okay, I don't know what it's for. There's possibly some kind of a marketing, some kind of market that would want to find out more about outsource, but I don't know anything about it. I'm not really interested in it. Okay, but I'll tell you about a book that is about exactly the same topic, but was completely different. You've all seen this. This book was called The 4-Hour Work Week. That caught my attention. And look at the message. Look at the byline. Escape the 9 to 5. Yes, that's exactly what I want. Live anywhere, yes, and join the new rich. He's painting a dream. Timothy Ferriss is painting a dream over here. He's saying, you don't have to do all this. It's a 4-hour work week. And by his own admission in interviews that you can watch on YouTube, he says, no, it's not about 4 hours a week, but it's a great lesson over here because the idea was not new. Hundreds of books about outsourcing had been published prior to this. But what he changed was the message. The message was new, and the resulted in book sales of over 5 million books the last time I looked. And his business is now, as he consults to others, is over $100 million. Multiply that by 17. A huge amount of money over there. Okay, so folks, I mean, it's just crazy. And the book is actually sitting in my bookcase. As I turn my head now, I can actually see it. All right, very interesting book. And I probably will never do what he's asked, but just the idea of it appeals to me. So let's take a look at it. Okay, really. Number one, what is your unique mechanism? What is it that makes you so different and so special from the others? Your product, your service, the way you do it, the way you deliver it, etc., the experience you give, the personalization, all of those things that we're talking about. But then you also have to have a big marketing message, a marketing idea. And I've said to you in previous occasions that it's really about an emotionally compelling offer. When you took a look at those that slide I put up less than 5 minutes ago about all the buttons that you can push, save them money or make them money, save them time, make them time. What are they not sleeping at night because of? What do they fear? How are you going to make them look good? Those are all emotionally compelling, but don't forget, you can also appeal intellectually by making things interesting, where they become curious, where they say, I've got to find out more. I told you, I bought the Timothy Ferriss book because the title appealed to me. I've read it and it makes a lot of sense to me, but am I ever going to do it? No, probably not. But it was interesting to me to find out about why this was such a bestseller, and I use it in my obviously in my webinars as an example. And you've got to have a SIN offer. What does SIN stand for? I don't like the term. I should actually turn it around. Okay, but it's got to be a superior offer. It's got to be an irresistible no-brainer. When they look at this, they've got to say to themselves, oh, I don't care what it costs. All right, not always possible, but it's what happens. If you take a look at my wife purchasing Clinique products, are they superior in my wife's mind? Yes. Are they irresistible? Yes, because they also give her lots of freebies and packages. They have promotions. It seems to me every week they have a new promotion. And from my wife's point of view, it's a no-brainer. It makes her look more beautiful, but it makes her feel more beautiful. And that's what it's all about. So the better the offer, the better your sales conversions are going to be, okay? This is a little Anglia, little clapped out old car. Some of you might remember them. They were on the roads in Johannesburg in the 1960s. I think the last one I saw was in the 1970s. And then they all were just put to bed in a car graveyard somewhere. I don't think there are many of them left in the world today. But do you know, if you just happen to have an Anglia in your back garden, that Anglia would be worth 10 times more than the original purchase price. In fact, probably close to about 100 times more. Why? What actually happened? You see, in the Harry Potter books, in the second book, what happened is that when Harry Potter and his friend Ron Weasley missed the train to Hogwarts, how did they get to Hogwarts? They stole an Anglia, a light blue Anglia, and it's on posters everywhere, movie posters, and on the front of the books and so on. And this Anglia, which Ron Weasley's dad just happened to have, okay, was now suddenly repopularized. The nostalgic value, but also the current value of that Anglia. Can you see what I'm talking about? It's the perceptions of customers that we have to change. Gary Halbert was a very famous copywriter, and he always used to use this lesson in his lectures, okay? If you and I both owned a hamburger stand and we were in a contest to see who could sell the most hamburgers, we're right next to each other at a fair or next to each other in a shopping center somewhere, what advantages would you most like to have on your side to help you win? We're going to have a contest, a one-day contest to actually decide, who's the winner, who sells the most burgers. And he gives students a chance to respond, and they would obviously say things like, obviously, for every single, we would want to have a price cheaper than yours, and we would want to have flags and banners and so on, and we would have a reward program and all those traditional things. And he would say to them, and the location, obviously, and he would say to them, okay, I'll give you every single advantage you've asked me for. For me, I only want one advantage. And if you will give me that one advantage only, just one thing, okay, when it comes to selling burgers, I'm going to whip the pants off all of you. And they would ask him, well, what advantage do you want? The only advantage I want is a starving crowd. Okay, that's what he wanted. If somebody's hungry, they're going to buy a burger. All right. And I think from that perspective, our job is sometimes to say, well, the customer is clearly not hungry, but how can I create that hunger? How can I point out to them that, hey, this is something that's actually very important. Okay. So here are some questions. Again, you've got a list of them. I'm going to whiz through them because I want to finish off today. But how can I let people know something is coming without having it feel like I'm trying to sell them something? How can I tease their curiosity? How can I help get their help in creating this product? How can I make this collaborative? How can I figure out what their objections are to this product? What will be against? Is it the price or is it something else? How long it takes? What is it? How can I start to engage my prospects in a conversation about my offer? How can I be engaging to avoid the corporate speak that'll kill my launch before it even starts? Okay, how can I make this exciting and humorous and even and fun? Okay, how can I stand out in a crowded market? How can I be different and unique? How can I figure out how my market wants to be sold? How do they want to be sold? Where do they want to be sold? Where is it they feel safe being sold at? How can I figure out my exact offer, and how can this naturally lead into my launch sequence where I'm actually going to do something? So you can see that your email list is not a strategy, it's the strategy in today's world. And this is where it all starts for me, okay? It's not about cold calling. The cold calling hard work is done, the heavy lifting is done by an email strategy. And you can start off literally. There's a case study from one of the young ladies who attended my course at Ort, and she was just had children. She was very kosher at home. And what happened is she developed kosher baby food. Her database consisted of a grand total of 30 names. And some of those names were people in her family. Today, she's running a very successful kosher baby foods business. All right. Why? Because it starts off small, but she built it up. She started educating. She started sending out emails just to that list. And other kosher people would then say to her, hey, they would pass it on to somebody else. You run a kosher house. You've just had a baby. Look at this. And so, of course, it just grew magnificently from there. Tracy, you'll remember who it was. Okay. So let's now move to a typical approach in how do you build it? Well, your sources for your database are your personal connections. Start with them. Social media, all of them, but be relevant. You've got to add value before you start asking for value. You can use search traffic. Google My Business is one of the webinars that was run in the Ort series. Look at the Google My Business webinar. It was fantastic. You got to just Google your business, put it on a map, and take advantage of SEO, as it's known. You can go for paid for traffic if you're really desperate, but it's too expensive. You can use the power of referrals, give them some incentive to refer you, not only a good feeling, but something that makes it worth their while, vouchers, bonuses, free books, and so on. You can use your JV partners to grow your list. You only borrow that list once from them, but whatever business results from that becomes your client as well. And any other way that you can use. Remember that the email is 20 times more effective than cold calling. All right. The moment somebody cold calls me on a telephone call, my defenses go up. With emails, it's you need to do a lot more of them, but it's less threatening, far less threatening. Okay, and that then leads us on to our final topic before I summarize, and that is when it comes to these things, you got to think about your target audience. This happens right at the beginning, okay, but I've left it for last because it's so important, okay? So you've got to identify who your dream customers are. And from that perspective, who would I love to deal with? But you also need to know who you want to repel. There's a lot of people out there who take chances and they want something for nothing. They want it for free. And if you're happy to give it for free because it makes you feel better, that's absolutely fine. But if you realize that they just, are doing it because they're jerks, then you want to be able to repel them as well. Okay. And that's why, for example, I find unsubscribes very helpful. If somebody takes the trouble to click on unsubscribe, it takes them 3 seconds to do that, but I know that they are not interested and they never will be interested. So it's better to not send something to them than to send them something which is just, put into junk mail. So what is the superpower that you have that they'll love? Create a detailed avatar description. What are they passionate about? What are their goals, dreams, desires, their fears, frustrations? What's a day in the life of these guys? Okay, and from that perspective, by living a day in their life, you will understand so much insight about them. I just read a case study on these MRI machines in hospitals, these huge machines, which are even bigger than an X-ray machine. And a little 6-year-old child is so scared of this machine that is huge, and then they've got to go into this tunnel, and then it looks technical, and they scream and cry. And the guys at Linksfield Hospital told me that the reality is that they sometimes literally have to call in their anesthetist to sedate this child before they can actually do this CT scan. I mean, it's absolutely awful. So eventually General Electric, the company that produces these things, turned it into an adventure. And what they do is it's a Star Wars type thing. And the beginning of the tunnel is one of those things that you would typically recognize in Star Wars. The whole of the ward where the thing happens is actually painted in bright colors. And then the radiologist then says to the child, you are now going on an adventure. And when you press this button, okay, you're going to go into warp speed. And there's a whole story that goes over there. And the person who actually invented this was the guy who was the chief designer for the original MRI machine. And he went to see this machine being used literally a day in the life of a radiologist at a hospital. And he realized that kids were terrified of this machine and they were able to respond to it. Okay. So it makes a huge difference. Okay. And then what are the offers that they will find irresistible? All right. And so from that perspective, in my particular place, I've got avatars. I've got about 6 avatars. I've even gone so far as to have a picture. This is my one picture. Okay. I've given her the name Tembi. She's typically the HR manager or senior HR person, the HR director in a company. And I know who Tembi is. I know how well she's educated. I know where she lives. I know what car she drives. I know what her ambitions are. It's a generic thing, but this is because I talk to a lot of these people, okay, that I know who she is and what she does and so on. And so I have my avatars, my ideal customers, literally to the point where I actually have a picture of each one of them so I can visualize it. All right. And it's a very detailed description. Okay. And then you've got to also find out, where do they hang out? Okay. Where are they congregating? One of the things that the young lady with the kosher baby food did, because she's kosher, she had a little brochure made and she would hand it out at shul on Fridays or Saturdays. All right. She would go to the areas where there are kosher shops like Kosher World and so on. And, she would communicate with people, accost them in the street, give them a brochure and say, have you ever considered that you have a baby and there's no kosher food for babies? And so that's how she succeeded. She knew where kosher people congregate. All right. Nice word, congregation, by the way. Where do they hide from you? What are they reading? What are they listening to? What are they watching on television? What are they watching on YouTube? What are they playing? Are they playing games? Do they play music that you know? What appeals to them? All right. Which websites and social media do they visit the most so that you can get to them? Are they subscribed to anything? Are they influencers that can help you? These are the kinds of things that are so important. Okay, folks. That's my alarm to tell me I've got 5 minutes left. All right. And most critically, what keywords are they searching for to find information on Google and YouTube and so on? All right, what is the bait that you can use to attract them? When you understand them, you know what the hook is that you can use, the story, the offer that you will use to attract your dream customers, okay? So everything you put in your ads, your emails, your landing pages, your upsells, your webinars, phone calls, business cards, keynote, everything should include some kind of a hook and a story and an offer. And if you ask me to pick which one of these is the most important, it would be the story. The hook is what gets them interested, but you can probably get away with not having a hook if you don't have a story. But that story must always be followed by an offer. You've got to, ask them for something. So what will grab their attention long enough for you to tell them a story? That's what the hook's about. Story selling is what the terms that they're using. When you find out what your dream customers want, it becomes very easy to attract them with your offer. So what is your attractive character? What is it that you do that is so important to them and that they can identify with? All right. And I told you I would come back to this picture. One way of making sure that you are more successful at this process is by the power of quizzes. A quiz, people love quizzes for some reason, and it makes you even more effective and targeted. And what happens is a quiz can give you an idea of where you want to put this particular customer. So now suddenly, instead of one big generic database, you have 3 different groups of people. I mentioned that one of my groups is HR, senior HR people, but another one is anybody who's responsible for customer experience in an organization, the marketing people, the call center people. In fact, call center people are a third one. And it's just a simple quiz with 3 questions. People seem to love quizzes and fill them in. They're almost junkies, okay? So what happens is, you do them sometimes in a silly way. If you were a cheese, what cheese would you be? But you answer simple questions, okay? And it leads to very, very cheap leads because people love taking these things. But a well-designed quiz can then lead to some very, high sales conversions for you, okay? And then the answers can double or even triple your sales conversations, your prospects, and they're involved. It took them a few seconds or a minute or 2 to fill in the quiz in a very non-threatening way. All right. Also, one of the things that seems to come up is this whole idea of lead generation magnets. How do you attract them? What is the hook? You can offer an ethical bribe. I do these regularly, okay? You can offer a PDF or a video or free training. You're experiencing one of those at the moment, okay? Incentives, you can offer some kind of incentive for them, especially a short-term powerful one if you have particularly products. One-time offers where you tell them, I'm doing this one time only because I'm experimenting, but the price is going to go up in April. You can use the power of scarcity and FOMO, or fear of missing out. From my perspective, the thing that is most scarce is my diary, my time. I can only coach so many people every week. It's simple. So I let them know that if they don't book now, they might have to wait. You can also get them to say, what? You interrupt the pattern. So you take a common phrase, and I just had a blank. I had one which I wanted to share with you. I just had a blank on it. But you take a common phrase and you turn it upside down. People are, what? Did I just see what I just saw over there? All right. And then you can offer memberships through a cool tribe, through events and rituals and things. We spoke about tribes when we spoke about Seth Godin. And then you can also offer science and research. For example, at the moment, I mentioned to you, there's a survey in South Africa that was carried out where they said 63% people are suffering from anxiety and depression. When I read that, as somebody, by the way, who is one of the 63%ers, okay, the last 2 years have been hell on me and on many of you as well. And I don't want you to admit to it, okay? But the point I'm making, I know that more than half of the people that you now encounter on a day-to-day basis feel this deep sense of anxiety and depression, all right? And not being able to regain control of our lives. And so from that perspective, I said to myself, is this something that I can use? I'm going to be doing a post about it, okay? But I told you right at the beginning, if you use that statistic, you can then bring a smile to their face for 1 minute. Just share something funny or something hopeful or inspirational with them, just for that 1 minute over there, okay? And then through the principle of reciprocity, okay, it will help you. All right, let's finish this off. So what unique result or value are you going to create for them in your SIN offer? It really is about how do you transform them? What is it that they will be different because of what? Because of your involvement. What will actually change in them? What will be better about them because of what you've done? So they will sleep better at night. They will be more attractive. People will like them. They'll inspire others and so on. So let's return to that little scale then. We've always got to give compelling value. RAP is that model from Seth Godin. Are you relevant in your marketing, whatever it's going to be, phone call, live, email? Or is it anticipated? Do they look forward to hearing from you because you've entertained them, because you spark off something in their mind? And is it personalized? All right. Those three are the non-negotiables. And the most powerful of those is, have you created some sense of anticipation? See what you can learn from Hollywood in terms of that. Folks, I'm over my time. I'm going to wrap it up right now. So if we were to start a biltong business now, an online biltong business, okay, how would we succeed? We would start off with our connections. Hey, I'm thinking of starting an online biltong business where we will deliver via Mr. Delivery or via one of the courier services biltong to you. Would this be something that you'd find attractive? Some of your friends would say, oh, I love biltong. Others would say, no, I don't think it's going to work. You then pursue those that would love it. And you ask them why, what is it, and so on. And then you start investigating, what does biltong mean, okay? And then you would start saying, well, biltong is a great high protein snack. So you look for people who are looking for protein snacks without getting fat. Great. Where do those people hang out? They hang out at gyms. Okay. But biltong is also a very tasty snack. Where would somebody go and buy biltong as a tasty snack? Well, I'm at work and it's 11 o'clock and I'm starving. And, you know, I don't want to go and have a whole meal. I'm going to sell them biltong at work. Okay. You can have biltong at work. And so what happens is we start identifying who the best customers are, where would they buy, how can we make it convenient for them. Our delivery method is that you don't have to do anything. We send it to you. There's a minimum quantity. People are usually understanding about that, but that's where it is. So we use the power of what is protein, what you've educated them on, and the trouble that you've taken to get it going. I think you can see it, how it works. So they have a problem, we give them a solution, but that in turn brings up another problem, and then you offer a solution, and so the cycle repeats itself. Focus on their end result. How will their life change? How will that be transformed? Layer as many influence triggers as you can, curiosity, you know, value added, fun, etc. Always end every session with a call to action, even if it's just for feedback, okay? Even if you just say to them, download this now, and then you will see if they've downloaded the white paper. You will see if they attended the webinar, and then you can follow up if they've booked and they didn't attend. Always be adding value. We've said that so many times. And remember that not everyone will buy. The strike rate, you will know what your strike rate is. Remember that having no customers at all can be, no customer in the world can be worse than having no customers at all. That's really the bottom line. We need them more than they need us. But they are living in a world where they are never satisfied. So we need to do something. So what are you doing to make your customers feel special? How do you make them feel loved and wanted and appreciated? Because they will tell others when that happens. Most important question, why should this mercenary customer do business with me? Why? They are bombarded with sales messages all day. Why should they do business with you? You better have a handful of things that you can rely on, okay? And just to give you a bit of hope for us in small businesses, and I am a small business, Mark Twain had this thing, it's not the size of the dog in the fight that counts, but the size of the fight in the dog. We are maybe over here. There are those that are the Liberties and the banks and the Old Mutuals and the Pick and Pays and all the rest of them. But me, I just make kosher baby food. That's all I do. But I can be as profitable and successful as they are. I do things that they cannot do, because I'm small enough to be able to decide on it. So folks, if not you, who? Okay, you have to be able to do it. Remember that bringing happiness to other people, we somehow find ours. So in case you need reminding, remember that every morning in Africa, a little buck wakes up and knows it must run faster than the fastest lion. What's going to be killed? It's going to become breakfast. But every morning in Africa, a lion wakes up and knows that it must run faster than the slowest buck, or it will starve to death. In Africa, it doesn't matter whether you're a lion or a buck. When the sun comes up, you just better be running. That's the only choice we have. So thank you very much.